Hello and welcome, and it's so nice to see so many people actually attending. And this is part one of a three-part series that the museum is putting together. So my name is Sarah and I'm a museum assistant, and this is part of our 2023 sort of exhibition theme of the three Williams. So today I'm going to be exploring the roots of William Wordsworth and the importance of Hawkshead Grammar School at this time. So I'm also going to explore like particular aspects in the museum that directly link to him and sort of show the uniqueness of the museum. What I'm going to try to explore today is where did his inspiration sort of come from and why did he write the way he did? And I think this is to do with what was happening in his younger years and what caused his like inspiration and artistic mind. So some background context to why William Wordsworth ended up studying at Hawkshead Grammar School. He had come from Cockermouth after his mother had passed away and started at the school with his brother at the age of 9. And his sister was sent to live with relatives in Halifax, as the grammar school was only for boys. Now, it was the reputation of the school that sort of attracted families of a similar position like Wordsworth, and I'll sort of explain why this reputation, where this reputation came from later on. And because of Wordsworth's comfortable family estate that he sort of came from, they were able to afford private lodgings with a family in Hawkshead, known as Hugh and Ann Tyson. And I think with this sort of setup, it allowed him to be inspired to write his poetry, sort of with his surroundings and how he was interacting with Hawkshead in his school life. So what would school life be like for Wordsworth? One of our most popular aspects in the museum and what sort of attracts people and what they find fascinating is the carving on the benches. And we have a desk carving from Wordsworth, as you can sort of see in these pictures here. So this desk carving shows where he would have sat for the first 5 years of his school life, and where we think he was inspired to write poetry. There are desk carvings all around the school, including the walls, windowsills, and on both Victorian and Elizabethan benches. There's even initials on the doors and the walls. So it was very sort of accepted within the school. So this activity of carving was said to have been permitted during lunchtime only, and it was only in like lesson time, if they were caught carving the names, that they would have been disciplined. So in lunchtime, it was sort of seen as acceptable for them to sort of partake in carving the names and things. And I just think what a fantastic visual representation it's given us now. And they've inadvertently left their signatures of all the boys that have sort of come in the school, and then gone off into their working lives. And many of them would have gone off to Cambridge as well, which is quite fascinating. So Wordsworth would have had a long school day. It's typically starting around 6 o'clock or 7 in the morning. So this would have been very dependent on if it was summertime or winter time. And then probably finishing around 5 o'clock. And the majority of his learning would have been rote learning in Latin and Greek. And it's said that the boys were not supposed to speak any English in school, only through Latin and Greek. So this would have been quite a great way for them to pick up them languages. And Wordsworth especially would have been taught a wide range of lessons, including poetry and the classics. And he was taught by William Taylor, who was the inspiration for Wordsworth's interest in poetry. So this is our board of headmasters, and it's sort of a good representation of the dates that the museum went through and all the headmasters that the museum went through. So we can see William Taylor's name on the headmaster's board, and the other headmasters that Wordsworth went through. and he eventually moved to Cambridge and studied there. So when he went to Cambridge, he actually found himself a year ahead of his peers in maths. And this was due to the standard of education from Hawkshead. And this was actually a common option for a lot of the boys here, that they would go end up going to Cambridge, and it was essentially because the standard of mathematic teaching was so good here that it allowed them to get into Cambridge and pursue careers that Cambridge would let them. Sorry, just see. Oh yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'll probably do this recording, and I'm aware that I waffle quite a lot, so I might do this recording, and then any questions at the end, I might do another recording as well to sort of summarize people's questions and things. So yeah, that's absolutely fine. We'll put the recording up after it, don't worry about it. So yeah, the idea of them coming to this school was a lot to do with them getting into Cambridge. And essentially this is why the school was so popular and had a good reputation, and attracted a lot of boys from essentially miles away to travel on horse and cart on quite dangerous roads. So got to think the roads to Hawkshead wouldn't have been very substantial, and it still is a village in the middle of nowhere. So it just goes to show that the standard of teaching must have created this high reputation that it was worth travelling and then boarding in the village for. So this was essentially due to James Peake, and he increased the pupils' numbers from 45 to 100. Edward Christian was next and only taught for a year, and then moved back to Cambridge to carry on his legal career, and actually later became the Wordsworth siblings' solicitor in a sort of a battle to recover income owned to their father. So that's quite a loop that Edwin Christian sort of came back into the Wordsworth life. And then Thomas Bowman actually was known for expanding the school library, and he set up the subscriptions system, which allowed future students to have access to a wide range of books, which was quite a sort of exciting thing at that time, because books were very expensive, and books were sort of new things and their source of information. So that really sort of put Hawkshead Grammar School on the map even further. So this subscription scheme from the library was enabled by making boys who left the school donate a book, sort of as their contribution to the library. So this expanded the school library, I think, to around, I think it's got 1,600 books now, which sort of goes to show the success of this scheme. And we can see that Wordsworth actually donated to the library as well, because they conveniently wrote inscriptions on the first page to who they were, who that donated it, and where they went, where they were from, and actually where they were going. So it's quite a good record of where the boys came from, who they were, and where they ended up studying later on. So I always sort of think that when Wordsworth donated this Italian poetry book, because he studied Italian at Cambridge, I always sort of think, well, he either really thought that the boys needed to know about this Italian poetry and things at Hawkshead, and maybe it was something he would have wanted to study when he was studying Hawkshead, or maybe he thought that it wasn't one of his best books, and that he could sort of sacrifice that book and give it to the school. But probably the first one, just because it was him and a group of other boys that sort of decided and got together to donate these books. So yeah, it was quite a nice thing that they did. And obviously this is the reason why the school library expanded so much and allowed new students to then have this information for a small subscription fee, sort of let them read interesting books that weren't particularly common at the time. I mean, we see books about, I think there's one about the Turks and things, and we can see that the binding's falling off and the pages are bent and things. So obviously that one's been well read. And the fact that the school is still cataloguing them to this day just goes to show how many books were donated to the library and how many books the library did have. So yeah, that was like the educational background as to why Wordsworth ended up in Hawkshead, and sort of a bit of context as to why he was sent there and why the school was so popular. Like I said, it was one of the most famous schools in Northern England for its time, and it just goes to show that the standard of education there must have been so high for them to travel there. So as I mentioned before, he did board with Hugh and Anne Tyson, who were a childless couple, and due to his mother passing away, he must have seen Anne as quite a mother figure and formed quite a close bond with her. And she's said to have allowed him to roam Hawkshead and the surrounding areas at sort of whatever time he pleases. Anne would let him sort of wander around and things and not be so restrictive on him. And I think that's just because she might have understood he had a lot of death in his early life. Well, his mother died, and then his father died when he was 13 as well. And actually his headmaster, William Taylor, also passed away while he was there. And he was the one that sort of inspired him to write poetry. So that must have been quite hard hitting from him as well. So for a young child, this must have been quite stressful. And we could sort of see that in the poetry he has made in the references to Hawkshead and its surrounding areas, including what he got up to, what he found on his adventures as a child. Yeah. So we can sort of see this poetry that he wrote relating to Hawkshead quite obviously. Yeah, so we could definitely see reference like ice skating up on Esthwaite Water, return to Hawkshead, things like that. So it really goes to show how much of a anchor Hawkshead was for him, and sort of, in my opinion, the only stability he had in his childhood, because he's been moved from Cockermouth to Hawkshead. His mother's died, his father then dies, his headmaster dies, and then he's sort of formed a bond with Anne, and then sort of allowed to release his energy through what he sees on his travels and wandering about and things. So I think that's why he makes so many references to Hawkshead, because I think personally that's why he enjoyed Hawkshead, was its scenery and what he got up to, and like his school days and childhood and things. So yeah, that was just a quick sort of summary of how I thought why Wordsworth wrote the way he did, why he ended up in Hawkshead Grammar School, the importance of it, sort of the main things that attract visitors to Hawkshead, including the desk carvings and things like that. Any questions, I'll try to answer them, but if I don't know the answer, I will go away and find them, and I can email you later on and things like that.